Okay. Now, America's original hate group, the Ku Klux Klan. Why was the Ku Klux Klan founded? Simple. The Ku Klux Klan, and I asked a friend of mine this today. She didn't get back to me yet. The Ku Klux Klan was founded for one reason. It was founded by prominent Democrats for the sole purpose of stopping Republicans from regaining control of the South, and that control included helping former slaves become educated and rise to citizenship. Now, there were a lot of lynchings and beheadings and dismemberments and floggings and burnings and rapes back then. Why did they happen? Well, simple. Back then, pretty much 100% of freed black men, all black men are free now, voted Republican. Difficult to imagine, but it's true. So the Klan targeted them for violence, not because they were black, but because they were Republican. Now, when the Klan saw white men, the Klan didn't know what to do. Were they Democrats or Republicans? The Klan didn't want to kill a guy and then find out the next day he was a white supremacist. You don't want to do that. So the Klan would follow white people. They wanted to see, if a white woman had a schoolhouse and she was teaching freed black men how to read. If a white man went to a town hall meeting and said, I'm accepting the Republican nomination. If a white man was friends with a black man, they were targeted as well. There were a lot of white people that were targeted because they were helping the black people. That's why the Klan targeted whites and blacks together. Men, women, children, they didn't care. It was ultra fanatical, left wing, and most historians considered the Klan to be the terrorist wing of the Democratic Party. Between 1870s and 1880s, Republican congressmen and senators spearheaded federal mandates which forbade discrimination. Now, can you imagine an America that had federal law ending discrimination in the 1870s, 1880s? It happened. Now, in 1892, Democrats took control over the House, the Senate, and the White House. All those mandates were repealed. All of them. And when they were repealed, state Democrats, using the 10th Amendment, states' rights, decided now they were no longer controlled by the federal government. They were free to now make separate bathrooms, separate drinking fountains, separate buses, separate lunch counters, separate schools. All of that segregation crap you see in the 1950s and 60s was because Democrats destroyed federal mandates put in place by Republicans to protect minorities. Okay, Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington was the first black man invited to the White House for a formal dinner. The White House was once serviced by slaves, and I imagine a lot of former slaves came into the White House to pay respect to President Lincoln. Booker T. Washington was the first black person invited into the White House by the president for a sit-down dinner. The president's name was Theodore Roosevelt, Sr., a Republican. Now, Roosevelt's kid cousin wasn't as good as he was. In 1936, we had the Berlin Games, the Berlin Olympic Games, I'm sorry. Jesse Owens, a black man, upstaged Adolf Hitler's blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryan, he upstaged him in a race. Hitler refused to shake hands with Jesse Owens because Jesse Owens was from a race he considered to be inferior. Let's talk about Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He went out of his way to communicate somehow with every white athlete. Telegram, letter, maybe a phone call. Phones were very, very rare at the time. Maybe a phone call. Maybe he met one or two of them. He went out of his way to avoid the black athletes, including Jesse Owens. Also, if you look very, very, very hard, you will find pictures of FDR in a wheelchair. He was very good with censorship, better than race relations anyway, and it is very hard to find a picture of him in a wheelchair. It is impossible to find two things. One, video footage of FDR in a wheelchair. Another thing that's impossible to find, a photograph of him with a black man. There is no photograph of FDR with a black man, ever. Nowhere. If you found it, it will be worth $1 million. His wife was a little more lenient. His wife invited a black opera singer who was shunned by the elite society. Eleanor Roosevelt invited her to sing in front of Lincoln Memorial. And Eleanor Roosevelt flew with one of the Tuskegee Airmen. And Eleanor Roosevelt pressured Franklin to allow the Tuskegee Airmen to go fight for their country. I'm going to check one more thing. Oh, I got way under. Yeah, I don't want to get lost. I always check my time. And I have a clock here too, but I'm freaking paranoid about the damn time. Okay. Harry S. Truman. Harry S. Truman was a conservative Democrat. He desegregated the military. Eisenhower. General President Eisenhower. The Supreme Court decided in Brown v. Board of Education that if you have a public school, you must allow all children to go there. Doesn't matter what color their skin is, allow them to go there. I forget his name and I can't pronounce it, so I'll do it again. I'll put the governor of Arkansas up again. The governor of Arkansas didn't like that ruling. He decided to go against it. He ordered the Army National Guard of his state to stand in front of the schools and keep out black students. President Eisenhower, the governor was a Democrat by the way, President Eisenhower, a Republican, a devout Republican, ordered the National Guard to stand down. Then he told the 101st Airborne Division to go to their Arkansas and to escort the black students into the school and protect them from the white supremacists, including their own governor. The governor even shut the school system down for an entire year because he didn't want the races to mix. Well, that's whatever. President Eisenhower and Vice President Nixon went out of their way on several occasions to invite Dr. Martin Luther King himself into the White House. Now, this is in the 1950s, which is the height of racism, and you have a Republican vice president and a Republican president inviting a black man into the White House. I don't know if there was a recording of their interviews or what they discussed exactly, so I'm not a historian, but Dr. King was invited into the White House by a Republican president as an honorable guest, and he was treated with dignity and respect. Yes, he was. JFK and the civil rights. JFK was also a conservative Democrat. NRA, beefed up the military, cut taxes, lived off that trust fund. Anyway, JFK was disgusted by segregation and all this bullcrap. He didn't believe in it. He made several great speeches about why it's hypocritical for the United States, a free country, to have second-class citizens. As he was giving that speech, civil rights activist Medgar Evers is returning home from work. Medgar Evers' wife and children are inside watching the speech, and as Evers gets out of the car in the driveway, he's shot in the back by the most fanatical Ku Klux Klan member that ever lived, Byron Della Beckwith, also known as D-Lay. Now, D-Lay shot Byron in the back while he was unarmed, and D-Lay shot Medgar in the back while he was unarmed, and he bled to death in front of his wife. Kind of similar, doesn't that remind me of John Wilkes Booth? Yeah. Now, Beckwith went to 2 trials, ended in mistrial. He was given a parade on the way home. He actually ran for lieutenant governor on the Democratic ticket a couple of years later, and then 30 years after the fact, he was finally brought to justice. Yeah, I'm checking again. I know I'm crazy. I'm going to discuss one more thing, then I'm going to cut for part 3. Okay, the 1965 Civil Rights Act was a federal mandate that did everything the Republicans did in the 1870s and 80s. They just did it over again. The 1965 Civil Rights Act was voted for by 60% Democrats, 80% Republicans. Now, one Democrat that voted against it was Robert Byrd. Senator Byrd was a devout lifetime member of the Ku Klux Klan, Democrat. He remained in office until his death in 2010. We need term limits. And Senator Byrd, speaking about why we do not need civil rights, came on television. He came on television and he said the word, yes, the word. He said it 3 times on television. In 1965, George Wallace, do this real quick. In 1973, I think it was, George Wallace tried to run for president. He tried to become presidential nominee. He didn't make it though. George Wallace was also shot in the back and paralyzed. George Wallace was a Democrat. Segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. He was a Democrat. I'm gonna cut now and I'm gonna finish up real quick. I'm gonna cut now because I'm gonna